This is the Agoro Carbon Farming Podcast. Agoro Carbon Alliance is taking action on a global scale to reverse the effects of climate change by decarbonizing farming and restoring carbon to the world's soil. On this podcast, we're going to explore carbon farming from the soil to the atmosphere and how it affects everyone in between. To learn more, visit us at agorocarbonalliance.com. Welcome to the first episode of the Carbon Farming Podcast. It seems like everywhere we turn, we hear or see something that has to deal with carbon. Carbon footprint, carbon neutrality, decarbonization, carbon credits. In fact, if you log into Google right now and go to the bottom of their page, they have a statement down there that says that they were the first major company in history to become carbon neutral since 2007. Amazon in 2020 became the world's largest corporation purchaser of renewable energy, and their goal is to be net zero by 2040. Apple says that they have a goal to make every Apple device carbon neutral by 2030. Some of our largest food corporations have sustainability goals and goals to reduce their carbon footprint. There's so much information, some disinformation out there, that we decided to start a podcast to help educate and bring the knowledge of this thing called carbon marketplace and to help educate. Today, we have two really smart people, degrees in economics, degrees in engineering and business. Alex Bell, who's a co-founder and CEO of Agoro Carbon Alliance, and Anastasia Pavlovic, who is also co-founder and the COO of Agoro Carbon Alliance. They're going to help us clear up some of these terms, clear up some of the information that's out there, and help us understand what this thing is all about, and maybe get some buy-in from you. Alex, thanks for joining us. Tell us really quickly, what is the carbon marketplace?
Thanks for having me on. Thanks for asking, Scott. I think what's important to think about carbon markets and carbon credits is that they're just a way of connecting finance, connecting money with change at farm level or change in any other way, shape, or form. And this change is based on reducing or removing greenhouse gas emissions. So it's really about putting money to work to change the state of an operation, and in this case, a farming operation.
I see. As I mentioned earlier, that Amazon has this goal to be carbon neutral. I have an Amazon hub right across the street, and every morning, every afternoon, I see a fleet of trucks going out and delivering packages. And I'm thinking, there's no way that company is going to be carbon neutral. How can they make that claim, Anna?
It's a really hard question, and it's a really hard problem. And so I think it's important, Alex mentioned these are ways to help finance kind of move change. I think that the best way to think about this in the context of carbon credits is that the goal would be that there are regulations in place that help companies structure the way that they get to net zero or net negative. And so the idea there is that the majority of that focus is on reducing their internal emissions. That goes from everything to the power that they use from the grid in their location, just like we do in our homes, all the way down to the service providers that they use and how they emit, to get a total picture of those emissions. But the important part is that, and a common misconception that we hear so often is, can't companies just buy all these credits and not do any of the changes that they need to make? And so the very simple and straightforward answer is no. That is something that we are not okay with and that the industry is not pushing for. But that said, there is a remainder in every industry that is very, very, very difficult to remove. That's even harder when you talk about like an airline, for example, that they're going to do everything they can, but until there are technology advancements that help us not be reliant on fossil jet fuels, going to be very difficult to reduce farther. And so there are these places where carbon credits can be used very effectively to help people finance different types of change, in our case, agriculture.
Excellent. Alex, carbon credits. That term doesn't mean a whole lot to me. I don't know what a carbon credit is, just like I don't know what a Bitcoin is. I've never seen one. I've heard about them, never seen one. I've never seen a carbon credit. What is a carbon credit, and how does a big corporation use one of these or get a hold of one of these? How is it produced?
Sure. Great question. Most consumers, people like you and me, have never seen a carbon credit. Okay, so that's perfectly normal. I think the first distinction to make is between compliance credits and voluntary credits. So compliance credits, like their name indicates, is something that's mandated by a government or a regulatory body. And in the case of the US, that's really California today. And in Europe has its own program, and there's some other countries, Canada, Australia, have their own. That is not what Agoro is focusing on today, and that is not what a lot of the folks in the farming community are focusing on today. What we're talking about here is what people call voluntary carbon credits. And those carbon credits are essentially a proof that there's been a removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere or a reduction of emissions that would have occurred in a business as usual scenario, and that reduction or removal is proven and documented and auditable, and therefore is seen as valuable because it is a negative emission, essentially. It is something that has not occurred or a reduction of something that has occurred. And you put a price on that. And what is that price? That price is essentially pricing in pollution. It's pricing in the negative economic externality of what that ton of carbon would have been. So if you simplify it down, it is a sum of money that represents the value you're putting on a ton of carbon being taken out from the air or not emitted, so that a corporation can buy that credit and essentially, through accounting rules, use that to compensate the part of their emissions that are remaining. After they've done everything they can to reduce emissions, to avoid emissions, there's that last bit that they need to compensate. And how do they do that? They do that with carbon credits. And they do that with carbon credits that are science-based, that are audited, that people can trust. And that is how corporations do this. And that's how responsible corporations move towards net zero.
That is one of the simplest explanations I've ever heard of this whole process. Thank you, Alex. Anna, tell us a little bit about how Agoro Carbon Alliance was founded and what the solution Agoro Carbon Alliance is providing.
Absolutely. So we were founded by Yara, and many of us worked as part of Yara in different groups. I worked in the kind of digital farming or precision ag element of the business. And so the idea was, what elements from the digital side, the data side, the agronomic knowledge, what are we bringing to bear on the field to help farmers implement some of these changes? And so in the historical Yara context, that's been a lot around the 4R practices, thinking about the different types of nutrition products that you could apply and how to do that in a better way. But there was this, broader question of, what about all the different types of conservation practices? How do we think about that as a big ag company? The idea was really to create a kind of an engine or a machine that helped farmers make these changes and that would allow us to monetize them on the sales side, like Alex said, with corporations and entities who are investing in these programs to help pay farmers and really support them through this transition journey, which is challenging and hard and often expensive. And so, rather than coming with this is what you have to do, it's a regulation, sorry, deal with it. We wanted to try to leverage this market in this transition period to really help farmers to make these changes and to make that a lot more practical and easy. And so I think one really important topic related to your previous question about carbon credits is, I think, to me, in the long view, the carbon credit is just one type of what will be in the future many types of different assets that help to lever and monetize these changes in a really awesome way that works with regulation to drive and make it happen. And so I think that's really important, because a lot of times people say, well, what's the future of carbon credits? Is that really going to be the thing? And it's important to say, probably not. But I think this mechanism that allows you to support farmers in driving change is a really important set of levers that the assets at the other end will change. How and what people are paying for in terms of this will change, but it still allows us to help the farmers in so doing the practices. So it's important to take both the really short-term view and also the long.
Now, that's a really good point. Alex, how does, if a grower is listening to this, How do they produce a carbon credit, and what does Agoro do to help them produce more?
Sure. I think very practically, at the very basis of what we're doing is a very simple biological process called photosynthesis, which all growers are deeply, deeply familiar with. And that is the technology we're leveraging to make this work, essentially by making sure we're maximizing photosynthesis and that we're protecting the carbon that we are putting in the soil, making sure it stays in the soil. So that being said, what that means is that we work with growers in the US and soon around the world to find ways to sequester carbon and keep it in the soil. And we do that through cover cropping, tillage management, zero till. We do that through nutrient management. We do that in the ranching space with biodiversity, fertilization, rotational grazing. There's a number of other practices coming down the pipeline. So that is, let's say, the theory. Now, what Agoro does, and what's deeply rooted in our DNA, is this agronomic knowledge and agronomic excellence. And what we mean by that is it's fine and dandy to have these prescriptive standards that tell you what can and cannot be done in order to create a carbon credit. But these documents are several, hundred pages and quite high level. What we do is we help farmers translate that into practical, possible ways of working that stick and that succeed. Because at the end of the day, the only way that this is going to be a successful additional revenue stream for the farmer is if she or he is successful in making that work. And as a business, Agoro is only successful if the farmer is successful. So it's really in our interest to support the farmer, not just with starting the journey, but to continue on in that journey to make sure that carbon farming sticks and scales.
I love that. I'm going to put my ranching hat on, my grower hat on right now. And I'm going to say, you know what? This sounds interesting to me, but my number one priority is to grow the most amount I can grow, the yield and quality that I can, to make the most money I can with the limited resources I have. Does this process limit that, or does it enhance it?
Well, I would say, Scott, that for me, farmer profitability is the number one thing that the farmer or the rancher should be considering. Before yield, before quality, it's profitability. And I think that what we're doing here is really to help by providing these incentives, these climate finance incentives, help in the short term to get onto a pathway to better long-term profitability. Now, how? Frankly, by increasing the quality of the soil of the farm or of the ranch, by increasing the resilience of that land to extreme weather events, and also to reduce dependency in some cases to some inputs. So I think that by doing all those things in the long term, we're helping put the farmer on a path to long-term profitability. In the short term, climate financing and carbon credits are a great way to incentivize that change. So essentially in the short term, putting money behind change that we know is going to add profitability in the long term. All of this is predicated on maintaining current yield levels. There is no world where what we are doing comes at the expense of yield and of food security. Because when you think about this at the strategic level, that is a non-starter. This needs to be about feeding the world and protecting the planet.
That is perfectly stated. I love that. And to have Agoro Carbon Alliance backed by Yara, which is a food company, which is a farming company, and the people that are out helping these farmers implement the practice changes are agronomists. They're not just salespeople that are trying to make a buck and trying to push the buck down the value chain. They're agronomists that are helping the farmer for long-term profitability, like you said, Alex, and sustainability. They want this ranch or this farm to transition to their kids, their grandkids, their great-grandkids, and they don't want to do anything that will be a deterrent to that. And that's what I think is beautiful about this is the practice changes that I hear that Agoro Carbon Alliance is pushing or proposing are practice changes that are good for the soil, that are good for the sustainability of the farm. And as you put it, and I love the way you did this, is at not the expense of the yield. the yield needs to be the same or better if you're going to implement this. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense.
No, correct. Absolutely, it does not make sense. If you can't be doing this again at the expense of the primary mission of agriculture, of production agriculture, which is feeding us, feeding society.
Anna, what is a carbon offset? I've seen that written in articles and seen it at conferences. People are talking about offsets. What is a carbon offset?
So it's really the same thing as a carbon credit, just kind of different terminology. It's a unit measure of a carbon ton that can be used in those accounting processes that Alex talked about, that could be, bought or sold or used in accounting of a company or a government's greenhouse gas kind of quota.
Okay, perfect. I thought that's what it was, but I just wanted to make sure. This is an exciting time in our evolution of farming. Maybe this is the next stage of farming where we're really looking at sustainability and the soil health and how can we use that to protect the environment as a whole. What type of rancher or farmer is a good candidate for something like this, Alex?
I think it's the rancher or farmer that is focused on profitability. I think that's the right kind of rancher or farmer. It's the rancher or farmer that cares about the mid and long-term health of their soil. And it's the rancher or farmer that wants to build the value of their operation over time. That's really the main thing we're after, is we're looking for people who have that value creation mindset, that really want to build something, build a legacy, but in the midterm and long term, build the value of their business.
If someone's listening to this and they're not a rancher or a grower, but feel they want to get involved, Anna, is there something that they can do?
Definitely. I think one of the most interesting, and Scott, you mentioned it, one of the most interesting things that people like me, frankly, got kind of sucked into this world is the depth of what's been happening in this space for a long time. It hasn't been as populist for a long time, but there's been a lot of people who have dedicated their careers to the carbon markets in a variety of industries. I think one thing that is really helpful for the greater community consumers is to really dig in and learn a bit more about this and what it means. I talk with farmers and ranchers every day who feel that they have been kind of at blame for certain type of emissions, especially in big agriculture. And I think it's really important that a consumer, somebody who lives and exists in these environments in our today's world where everybody's talking about this carbon topic, as you mentioned, really start to engage with that a little bit more and think about, what can agriculture do to be better? What does that mean? And that doesn't mean that agriculture is a villain at the onset, right? But what it does mean is that there's a huge opportunity to improve. And we all agree that that's not going to happen by getting rid of agriculture. We need it. We love it. It's critical to our livelihood, no matter where you live. And so I think really digging in and just doing some research. We have a bunch of materials that we've been building that are built by those agronomists that you talked about on our website, agorocarbonalliance.com. There's kind of a interesting light, especially from somebody who's not a farmer and agronomist, to look into this and say, what does it mean for an agronomist to help a farmer do this? What do these practices mean? When I first started working in agriculture coming from tech, I was so shocked by the very little that otherwise super educated, smart people as consumers have in understanding agriculture. It's scary. I was one of them. I dedicated a ton of years to not being like that and learning more. And I was obsessed with it. But I think really just trying to learn more about what does it mean to improve these farming systems? Why is it hard? Because it's not so easy as just saying, all the farms have to do blah, and we're going to regulate it. And that's it. It's a very challenging system to manage. And farmers have dedicated their entire lives and multiple generations to doing this.
I love that. It's all a part of growing your knowledge, understanding what's going on. There's a lot of food companies out there with sustainability goals. Nestle, PepsiCo, Cisco, Tyson, all of them have these grand sustainability goals. And as a consumer, we should support those companies that are being proactive in producing food that is grown in a sustainable way. So I think we can all participate in this. Alex, you mentioned earlier that this is science-based. I want to dig into that just a little bit deeper. Let's say I have my rancher hat on, my farmer hat on, and I've decided, thumbs up, I'm going to sign up with the Agoro Carbon Alliance, and I make some practice changes. Is it a formula that you use to calculate how many carbon credits that I am producing or sequestering? Or do you come out and is there a magical device that tests the soil that says your carbon in your soil has improved from this baseline to an improved level?
What it is a combination of measurement and modeling. You can obviously measure, but when you look forward and you try to give forecasts and give ideas of what is actually scientifically happening, you also use scientifically based models. And these models are all coming out of academia, and they're deeply peer reviewed and sort of open source out there. So these are not proprietary models. What we do is a combination of both. And again, what's really important for the grower or the rancher when they get into these programs or when they get into a program like Agoro is really to understand that what they're doing is backed by the state of the art science and then will be valued by a potential offset purchaser. Because if that's not the case, then there is no real market for what's being done. So it's really important that whatever we do with a farmer is based on what the science today says to be true and also what the demand for carbon credits is.
Anna, Agoro Carbon Alliance was launched about 6 months ago, mid of last year, 2021. What are some of the biggest lessons or a lesson that you've learned in this journey?
I think the time that I've spent with farmers talking specifically about these things has been, for me personally, and as we extend that through the team, because now we have 40 some people in the US that are talking to farmers themselves as well. One of the early things that I was interested in exploring was how farmers from very different geographies in the US, because our variety is so massive, what their journeys to explore different types of conservation practices have been like, how they've engaged with programs that exist like EQIP and CSP and others, thinking about how do they get funding to do this now? What are their information sources? How do they network with other farmers to talk about this? So those are all sort of my academic interests in what I wanted to learn. And I think what was really amazing is the sophistication in what a lot of farmers have been doing for so long already in terms of trying these things, engaging with other farmers, even that are very different to them, that are across the country, and joining these kind of chat rooms and different things to learn way more about how farmers across the country and in Canada are trying these things. That was really, really impressive to me. The other thing that I think is really important to note is that when we started this, I think there can be a vein of people assume that, by saying we want to help farmers change things, that there's some negative connotation there. But I think for me, really just understanding what the challenges and those nuances are. Why is this so hard? Financially, operationally, what are the risks involved? What are the various perceived risks involved? And how do we help think about that? Which all leads to sort of education. And so what I've seen to be true is that the number one thing we can provide is helping farmers and their advisors, their existing communities, understand more about what this looks like. And again, today it might be focused around carbon credits, but I think in the long term, all of this machinery to help farmers make these changes and stick with them is what's going to be valuable. And so I think, learning that our number one goal is to just try to be great education sources and knowledge hubs that help people just navigate. I'm hearing all this information. I see all these articles. How do I just talk to somebody who can help me think about it? And, whether a farmer signs up with our programs or not, I believe that by investing in that education, we're helping the market at large.
Good point. As I've been in farming, I think I can say this almost 100% correctly. Farmers and ranchers are the environmentalists. Mm-hmm. They want to do what's right for the land and for the sustainability of the future. To your point, Anna, these journeys that all these different types of ranchers and farmers were very diverse in North America. Through this podcast and future episodes, we're going to be talking to ranchers and farmers within each of those regions and different cropping systems and soil types and geographies and climates, and try to get their journey, their personal journey. And hopefully that'll help the audience as well. Alex is the CEO of Agoro Carbon Alliance. Where do you see this going? You've been going for 6 months now. What's the future look like to you?
The future looks bright. The future looks promising. No, but really, seriously, the future, I see so much opportunity. Today, agriculture represents less than 1% of carbon credits traded. The carbon credit price has tripled over the past year. Demand far exceeds supply. I think that farmers need to see this as an opportunity, an additional revenue stream, and get in on it early to maximize the amount of time they're within this space to earn as much as they can. I think that Agoro is starting with carbon and will move to other transformations of farming, be it around biodiversity, water, what have you. And I think that we're really passionate about doing that in a way that makes sense for the individual farmers, be they in Iowa or Uttar Pradesh, Spain, Brazil, or where have you around the world. I see also a deepening number of partnerships and alliances. We are called Agoro Carbon Alliance, and that is a feature. It's not a bug. We are deeply committed to working collaboratively across the value chain. We're not here to disrupt anything, but we're here to evolve the food system, evolve the way farming is done with respect to the past, but with an eye to the future. So I see a really successful, exciting journey that is high impact, that helps farmers benefit and profit from changing the way agriculture is done to preserve natural resources and to protect the planet even better.
That's a great vision. Before we end, is there anything that someone that is listening to this episode should know that we haven't covered? Anna?
Whenever I am asked this question on panels or things, I always say that I think don't assume anything. A lot of our farmers have heard a lot from a lot of different sources. There's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of just sort of confusing information that I think can be easy to draw interpretation from. I think, use your research and your kind of networking power to really try to get good information and critical information about what's happening. And then second, don't be scared. It's new. A lot of people haven't heard about it. They need to understand more about what it means. It's not crazy. It's not going anywhere. It's going to be a really awesome opportunity for farmers. Get more information. Don't be scared. We're all here to help, and there's a lot of people in this industry working to grow this.
Alex, how about you? Have we missed anything that you think that the audience should know about?
No, I really think that it's really about seizing this opportunity, but like Anastasia said, really making sure that you're as informed as you can be. And what I can say is one easy way to start that journey, and it might not be the only thing you do and probably shouldn't be the only thing you do, is to reach out to one of our team to have that first discussion. Because, we're here to help you understand what makes sense, why it might work for you and why it might not, why some of your acres might be the right ones and some other ones might not. Because at the end of the day, we're in this to make this make sense, make this be profitable, make this be practical and possible for the farmer or the rancher.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Anna. Our goal with this podcast, as we envisioned it, was to help the value chain better understand this carbon marketplace thing. And I think we got a good start with this episode. How we can solve complex problems like climate change and sustainability with solutions that can positively impact the world. Like I said earlier, we're going to be speaking with individuals within this value chain, farmers, ranchers, agronomists, food companies, people in the marketplace that are buying and brokering these credits, and trying to find out how this is affecting their livelihoods. We hope you join us on this journey. If you have comments or suggestions, please visit our website at agorocarbonalliance.com, or you can call 888-224-7423. If you're driving and listening to this, don't take notes. Be safe out there. This will be in the show notes. So you don't need to worry about writing that down now. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. All those links are on our website at agorocarbonalliance.com. We thank you for joining us on this first episode. Stay tuned because we've already recorded a couple episodes already that also may help answer some of your questions and address some of your curiosities about this carbon marketplace. So thanks for joining us. We hope to hear from you, and we hope you continue to listen. You've been listening to the Agoro Carbon Farming Podcast, where we bring you knowledge on how to sustainably and profitably transform farming through carbon cropping. To learn more about how you can become a partner, visit us at agorocarbonalliance.com or follow us on our many social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn.